Good morning, everyone. It's good to see you here. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me okay. Great. And we'll start the way we have been these last few weeks by sitting together for about a half an hour so you can find yourself into a comfortable enough position to remain in for the next half hour. Remembering that practice can be really simple. So with this in mind, we can take a couple of deep breaths together. Just to invite all the energies to settle. Remembering that we're not demanding anything of the system, anything of the heart, anything of the body. We're actually more curious than anything. Curious to understand the impact of an invitation. And then, of course, the body will just breathe. Naturally, in its own rhythm and pace. There's so many influences as to how the body breathes. And as we attune to the breath, you can also appreciate the web of causality that impacts the breath moment by moment. So, although practice may be really simple, just connecting with the breath right here in the body as it flows in and out. We're also connecting with the complexity of causes and conditions that contribute to the breath as it is right now. Breath as an interconnected expression of life. And this honoring doesn't require more thinking. Just a kind of surrendering. We surrender to the breath as it is. We aren't trying to control it, make it different. Not trying to make it deep or smooth. We're not trying to control awareness of the breath. Surrendering to the causes and conditions that contribute to the breath as it is really helps us to accept, let go, and just settle into the truth of this. Experience it, know it. And not hold on. So we'll continue in silence now.
It gets more vertical.
Take a minute to stretch your legs if you'd like, to even step away from your computer for a couple of minutes. I won't start without you. It's nice to see all the good mornings coming in the chat. And it's good to be here with you. My name is Shelly Graf, and I'm one of the guiding teachers at Common Ground. If you're here hoping to see Mark, he will be back next Sunday, next week. So he's just getting back from retreat now and transitioning to leading a month-long retreat at the Forest Refuge, but he'll be teaching while he's there. So I'm sure we'll all be happy to see him again. And if you're actually happy to see me, I teach the Wednesday night practice group. So you can drop in any Wednesday. It's open to everybody. And I'll be continuing a 3-week series talking about the refuges. The refuges often are referred to as the 3 gems or the 3 jewels, the refuge of Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. And you don't have to know those words. I'll give you a quick overview. Taking refuge or going for refuge. In past weeks, we've talked about some of the ways that we might relate to the refuges, and one of them is by considering that they might be a verb, right? The going for refuge, the act of participating skillfully and walking the path with our full selves is how we might relate to going for refuge. And then going to the Buddha for refuge could mean honoring this wise being whose teachings we're following and benefiting from. And it could also mean recognizing the capacity for us all to wake up in the way that the Buddha did to the reality of life, right? The reality of the depth of the teachings. And here we bring in going to the Dhamma for refuge. So the Dhamma might mean the truth of our experience, the nature of our experience, when the awake mind or when mindfulness, mindful awareness, sensitivity connects with experience, whatever experience is, and understands something deeply, we might call this Dhamma. Understand something about how all things are impermanent or uncontrollable, and how clinging to experience and trying to control experience creates a kind of suffering for ourselves, an internal suffering. And then this week, I'll be talking a little bit about going to the Sangha for refuge, the third of the 3 jewels or the 3 gems. And this is perhaps an underrepresented refuge in the West here in the United States. And a really important aspect of who we are and how we live and how we practice. So going for refuge could be an orientation. We've talked a little bit about this in the last couple of weeks. An orientation in the direction of something that feels more sustainable than what we might find around us, right? It's easy to take refuge in things or experiences, but when we go for refuge, when we walk the path, we're actually questioning, like, is there something deeper, something that might sustain me through all the seasons of my life, right? Something that might support us in our collective well-being. And this is like at the heart of spiritual practice, going really asking those questions. Well, what else, right? If this is this it? Is this life here as I'm experiencing it now? Or is there another way of relating to all that we might experience as a human being that might be more supportive? So an orientation of some towards something that's deep. And then another way we might relate to refuge is a kind of maturity in practice, a transformation, but maybe a way of expressing a more mature practitioner, a more mature way of practicing as we continue down the path. I love this little quote by Ajahn Jeff, or Bhikkhu Thanisaro. He says, the act of going for refuge marks the point where one decides to take the Dhamma as the primary guide to conduct in one's life. It means that one's relationship to practice has matured from simple involvement into a real commitment. And so this is what we might see as the maturity or the transformational possibility of taking refuge. Like really not letting ourselves off the hook, yeah, in moments when it feels easy, but actually doing the hard work of um, finding something really trustworthy in the midst of all the complexities of our lives. And the refuges can be seen as a place of protection. So they might have an effective quality, right? A place where we feel safe or secure, maybe where we taste a kind of sincerity or integrity in practice. When we really take up the curiosity or the practice of going, the act of going, when we really make that a sincere practice for ourselves, we might taste the effective quality of practice there, like the kind of heart that's possible, the kind of safety that is in refuge that we might not find in many other places. And the one of the words to one of I believe it's a Pali word that points to gem, right? That can be translated as gem is retina, and it means that which increases delight. So going for refuge is associated with a kind of uplift of heart, right? It's not a big downer. It's a cause for happiness, right? Like, oh, look at that. This heart doesn't have to cling to experience. It can actually trust the movement of life, the movement of emotion, the movement of thought, the movement of of all that we might experience as part of our humanity. And human life has a lot of dangers, right? And on the Buddhist path, these dangers, we might say, they stem from the roots of greed and ill will and delusion. So going for refuge is a way of finding protection in a deep way that is about the release of the dangers, right? A kind of protection for ourselves and each other. And when we take refuge in Sangha, we're really understanding something about how greed and hatred or ill will and delusion manifests and proliferates in the collective. In the Satipatthana, which I've been referencing on these weeks of talking about taking refuge, there's a phrase where the Buddha asks us to remain focused. Like, how do we practice? Well, we practice by remaining focused, ardent, alert, and mindful. So, remaining focused, we might understand as being continuous, practicing from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to sleep, really exploring what it means to live in good and beneficial ways, what it means to cultivate skillful habits of mind, what it means to let go of that which we see and understand as unskillful. And this particular word that's often translated as ardent, I've been very curious about over the years. And often ardency is kind of pointed to as a passion or a um, effort, right? But it actually also means a kind of depth of feeling. So there's a bit of a devotional aspect to practice that might be represented in the refuges, right? You might have felt that in the meditation that we did together, that just the intention to let life be is a kind of refuge that can be felt with a little bit of surrender, like, it feels good to bow down to this, to the reality of like life, to not push or try to force things to be other than the way they actually are, right? So that aspect of going might be a kind of bowing, of surrender, of a yes, right? And that's how I relate to devotional practice. Just a real depth of like falling down on my knees. Yeah, this is the way it is. And we try all kinds of ways to take refuge, right? And part of understanding what it means to go for refuge is also seeing what doesn't work. And if we think of this, of going for refuge as a kind of protective quality, going to find some protection from the dangers of ill will and greed and delusion that are expressed in this heart and the world, we sometimes go to false refuge, like go to the planning mind or go to the worrying mind or the critical and complaining mind, the never-ending self-improvement loop that we're on as ways for looking for safety, right? And so realizing that these false refuges don't provide the kind of long-lasting safety that we're looking for. They sometimes provide a momentary relief. Right? Planning can be useful, for example, but the kind of depth that's available to us when we really go for refuge is beyond that. And in the Satipatthana, the Buddha reminds us that we contemplate our experience both internally and externally. So when we take refuge in Sangha, we take refuge in the internal, the kind of internal protection from greed and hatred when we really care to open to sensitivity as a primary motivation in our life and understand the depth that's available to us when we connect with experience, the Dhamma, and also the expression of humanity that's available in the collective and in our communities, right? It kind of it disrupts that sense of separation. And here in the United States, as a convert Buddhist community, so what does that mean but to be a convert Buddhist community? So as Buddhism moved from Asia through the world, in convert communities, communities like ours that took up a practice of Buddhism rather than a country that was like in Asia, that like Burma or Thailand, a Buddhist country, where that's built into the kind of collective way of being with each other. But in a community like here in the United States and in Minnesota, Buddhism, when it moves from place to place, it picks up some of the qualities of the cultures that it moves through. So here in the United States, it has picked up this heightened sense of individualism, or the what Pam Weiss calls the myth of ultra independence, right? And so Sangha, taking refuge in Sangha, points us to something that is quite different from this myth of independence. It actually points us in the direction of interdependence, which is at the heart of the Buddhist teachings. Interdependence. So moving from this kind of hero's journey, being very individualistic, go by yourself, conquer, achieve, we're learning that that experience is not controllable, and actually it doesn't pay dividends to consider that that we have a say in the manifest of suffering in our lives, right? We actually have some say in how we take care of suffering, but we don't have full say in its arising. And it's good to remember, like how does this, where did this come from? But that the Buddha was all about relationship. This is how we understand experience, through our relationship to experience, through our relationship to anxiety, through our relationship to pain, right? And after the Buddha's awakening, one of the first things he did was considered sharing what he learned, right? And I think it's so beautiful that the first thing he thought about sharing, or when he thought about sharing what he'd learned, he thought about sharing it to his teachers. And that's a very different thing, right? There's no like, oh my gosh, I'm not worthy of sharing this with my teachers. They must know so much more than me. It was like, oh, the beauty of the teachings. I care to honor my teachers with this wisdom. Just a just quite different, actually. And I find that it really moving, that the idea of being in community was such a powerful force that immediately one's teacher was at the fore of the mind of who to share this with. So this reality of interconnection. So Sangha is not in competition with the truth of anatta, or the truth of nature, or the truth of not self, whatever we might understand that to be. But this is, like I said, at the heart of the Buddhist teachings, that there is no separate self controlling everything, that we're actually swimming in a kind of web of causality. Everything that we experience has been birthed by a previous moment, right? Everything that a single moment, a mind moment, is not something that Shelly birthed, right? But actually, it was seeded in all of the previous moments of life that connected in particular ways to give rise to this. And this is quite natural to see in the collective, right? We might notice any of the social problems that we have as arising in a context, right? Arising in the context of uh, all of the ways that we live and survive, especially here in the United States, the realities of domination and supremacy that this country was founded on, the realities of independence and value of going at something alone. Every aspect of who we are is birthed in that context, right? Some beautiful aspects of our collective humanity and some challenging aspects of our collective humanity. So cause and effect and the interconnectedness of experience is at the heart of what we might understand here in relationship to taking refuge, going for refuge in Sangha. And it's hard to talk about this stuff without pointing to this well-known statement that Dr. Martin Luther King made. He said, "In a real sense, all life is interrelated. All men, or we might say people, are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly." Right? So we might not understand, I think that we might not understand that this moment affects many moments, many people, the wide scope of humanity and the collective. Indirectly, we might not even feel its direct impact here. Sometimes we do, right? We feel the impact of frustration and then taking it out on someone we love, for example. This is good to feel because it's how we know cause and effect. But we can trust that, just like when we look at nature, when we look at the actual natural world, we see that the sun and the soil and how we take care of the earth, the quality of the planet actually has an impact on how we grow food and what species survive, how we take care of, the planet has an impact on how the survival of our humans on the planet and so much more. But we might not see it all directly unfold in front of us, yet we can still trust, right? Because we understand something, we understand it, we can feel it, we can see it happening in nature, that it contributes. And we can look back at these um, contextualized social problems that we have across the world, and we can understand, like, oh yeah, right? We can see how how we have an impact on each other. What we do and what we say, what we forget to do and what we forget to say has an impact, even an indirect impact. So when we talk about going to the Sangha for refuge, literally what we mean is the community of practitioners. So the Sangha is the community of practitioners, and especially those of us, which could mean all of us, who have had some taste of freedom in their lives, right? And this doesn't necessarily mean the ultimate freedom, but a taste of what it means to let go and the value of trusting sensitivity and knowing deeply the experience of not clinging and how that benefits, right? So we all probably have a sense of what it's like to feel into a moment of suffering. And then when the heart kind of lets go of the constrictedness of that moment, then there's a kind of relief that's experienced, right? So here we taste freedom. So the Sangha, the value of Sangha, one of the values of Sangha is being able to model that for each other. And the bhikkhunis, the bhikkhus and the bhikkhunis, the monastic community, I'm so grateful for all of the people in robes who have come before us to carry the teachings forward because this is their full-time job, right? They practice so they can share with us the fruits of practice, right? So that we might see it modeled in a really substantial way. The power of practice and what's available to us when we really devote our lives to the exploration. So in order for there to be a path, many people have to walk it. And as we walk it, we're sort of clearing the path for others. We can't help but be a refuge for others because we're keeping the practice alive for each other, right? Every time we model what's beneficial about practice, we're actually keeping the practice alive for those who come after us. We're keeping it alive for each other. We're keeping it alive for our children, right? And we're keeping it alive for people who might just show up one day for the very first time, just like we all have. So, what a beautiful way to live our lives, to remember that we're all participating in this kind of modeling for each other. And I often think about this when we show up to community practice like this, that it's not, it's a really beautiful thing that we try on our best qualities, right? That we really show up in the best way that we can. Because one, we're cultivating the skillfulness of heart that will seed other moments of skillfulness, but we're also contributing something to a collective well-being that is really needed. We have in my house, we have a sign that says, love me when I least deserve it because that's when I need it the most. And I sort of love this um, possibility of trying on love, for example, in the times when we feel like it's the most elusive, right? But because that's what's needed. More hostility isn't really going to cut it, isn't going to help. Right? So, but trying on a heart that cares, even in moments when it feels complicated, is really important. And being a part of community is not easy. It's really complex, right? We come here and we don't know each other. We don't really trust each other fully. And so this devotion to living in a good way, this commitment to walking our practice with each other, for each other, feels like a real important step, a very difficult step, and a very important one, right? And it's beautiful to know that we're kind of all doing this together, so in different ways, sometimes easier, sometimes harder for each of us, but we're all doing this. We're all taking refuge in contributing something beneficial. We're all taking refuge in the possibility that manifests in the collective when we practice cultivating habits of goodwill, habits of skill, right? When we practice setting down what might not be useful, right? Acting out, reacting to challenges, internal challenges, right? I'm just going to commit because I'm here and because I know it matters to you and to me. I'm just going to commit to not reacting, right? That means I really have to watch my mind because frustration arises. I might react to that and just blame or take it out, yell at someone, right? Be a little impatient, be a little mean. That's a strong possibility. It happens for all of us. But taking refuge in Sangha is deciding to come here, watch and really watch my mind so that I don't do that. And trusting that to some extent we're all doing that and we're all benefiting. So you could see here that there's a strong ethical way to relate to taking refuge in Sangha. Engaging in harmlessness, this is the refuge of Sangha. The protection that we find in taking refuge in Sangha is the commitment to ethical conduct, right? This is how we can, even though we don't know each other and not trust each other, feel safe enough to show up, right? Because we're all participating like this. We're all doing our best to be ethical beings, to not rely on reactive habits, but to actually cultivate something that's beneficial. And the Buddha encourages us to be a refuge for all beings. And it's through this commitment to harmlessness that we can be a refuge for all beings. We're sort of offering each other the gift of fearlessness. Oh, you are safe around me because I'm really going to practice. I'm an imperfect human being. I contribute to the imperfections in the world. But while I'm here, I'm really gonna do my best to commit to creating an environment that's safe enough for all of us to be here. You might have noticed in the weekly email a couple weeks back, I think it was maybe 3 weeks ago, that Patrice Kelsch, one of our Dharma teachers, offered her own take on the 5 precepts in terms of engagement, right? So I'd like to read them because I thought they were so beautiful, and not just beautiful, but they represent the creativity in practice, right? To think about the precepts, these 5 trainings for ethical conduct, these 5 guidelines that we might decide to live our lives around, these 5 ways that contribute to harmlessness and make it possible for people to show up together who don't know each other and work through challenges, work through conflict, because we're all sort of committing to doing this. And this is what we do at Common Ground. We agree to participate in the ethical aspect of the path, which is a substantial part of the Eightfold Path. The Buddha laid out this path of practice, and 1/3 of the path is about living ethical lives. So it's, like I said in the beginning, certain when Buddhism flowed through the world, it picks up some of the characteristics in the culture of the places that it lands. And in the West, it's picked up uh, the parts of the path that are about meditation and solitude very strongly. But it's really important to not forget that ethics are 1/3 of the path. How we live in community and harmony with one another. And harmony means everybody singing like jazz, right? Everybody kind of playing a different tune, but come together in a really beautiful way, like a cloth, right? Like a song or a cloth. So everybody living in harmony, ways that we might live in harmony, the ways that we might live our lives so that we can feel the beauty of the practice amongst ourselves. This is what we might call the ethical parts of the path, the 1/3 of the path. And so Patrice rewrote these 5 training precepts, these 5 training guidelines in terms of engagement. I just like to read them because I thought they were really lovely and a beautiful expression of her own creativity and practice. The first one is taking up the training to not kill. So, number 1, do not kill. We begin with the intention of not harming self or other, even as we engage with hurt and trauma. Let's let that land for a moment. And the second training is the training in not taking that which isn't given freely. So she says, number 2, do not steal. We resolve not to take anything that is not our own, including any projections we may think another holds. And the third training precept is taking up the training to not misuse our sexual energies, our sensual and sexual energies. So number 3, she says, do not misuse sexual energies. We take responsibility for monitoring and working with our own energies, not letting them undermine or overpower our engagement with others. And number 4, taking up the training to not speak mistruths. So number 4, she says, do not lie. We practice deep listening even as we speak our truths, acknowledging the limits of our own understanding. And number 5, taking up the training to protect the mind from intoxication. Number 5, she says, do not misuse substance. We restrain ourselves from acting on any impulse that fosters carelessness in either or both senses of the word, being heedless and being heartless. I just really love the far-reaching possibilities of how we might live into these guidelines that support our own well-being while living in community, right? And practicing in community as a way of taking care of each other, right? Patrice Kelsch. There are these, I think 7 of them, blue zones. Do you know the blue zones in the world? There's one blue zone in the United States in Point Loma, I think Loma Linda, Point Loma in California. And it's a Seventh-day Adventist community. I was remembering one of the articles I read about the blue zones. It's where people are really healthy and live longer. And I'm not an expert in blue zones, so I'm just a very crude definition of what a blue zone is. Some of you might know far more than this. But as I was preparing to offer some words to you today, I was remembering like the beauty of community, right? And I read a couple of articles, additional articles about the blue zones, and to really understand what makes them so healthy, right? And one of the things that I remembered, and through what other people have written about them, people who live in some of the blue zones, is that they really know that they really see the value of being connected, of working together for something, of taking care of each other. It's not only that, like in California, this blue zone exercise is a high value, but not the kind of going to the gym exercise necessarily, but walking places for, just as part of how they do life, for example, and really taking time to rest for spiritual practice and and socializing with one another in particular so that they're modeling the value of health and well-being for and with each other. It seemed to be embedded in what they do. And so although it may feel like a community is so complicated, right? Because of who we are and how we relate to one another, and it doesn't always feel easy to do that. But we might understand something from these pockets of communities that really do it well, right? How they really belong to one another, right? There's no misunderstanding here about the interconnectedness of the relationship that they have and the way that that people influence one another. It's a big thing, right? That we show up and uh, we're all going to be changed by this one simple moment of showing up on a Sunday morning for an hour and 15 minutes together. And so we want to take that seriously. When a friend of mine came to practice at Common Ground, and they told me that it was just really hard. They didn't see their people reflected in the community. And so they went to talk to their teacher about it, and their teacher said, "Will you be that for someone else?" It's a decent way to practice. It's not the easiest thing in the world to offer what we need, right? Sometimes we have to connect with that need in the heart, and one way of relating to that is to offer that need to someone else and see if that has an impact. It's not the only way to do things, but I found that I've taken that lesson from my friend and really applied that to my life over and over and over again and have seen the benefits. When I feel lonely, reach out to someone, right? And see if it helps the heart feel less lonely to give the gift of connection. When I feel frustrated about the uh, greed and hatred that's expressed in the world, practice love and see if it helps this heart feel a little more balanced, knowing that are people who are contributing to a different kind of well-being. So thanks so much for being here and patiently attending to my reflections about taking refuge in Sangha and for all the other weeks we've shared together this month while Mark has been away. It's been a real joy to me to be here with you all, and I hope it's contributed to some good in your life.